Hello, welcome to the programme. Just a solo guest this week, but he's a big man filling that big hole, a big character, and also a very big player in Sheffield United's history. Some of the more recent history, I hasten to add. And apart from being a fine number one for the Blades, he's continued to be over the years, I think, a fine ambassador for the club. Somebody that they're proud to be associated with, somebody who it's always a pleasure to speak to. I refer, I'm not sparing your blushes there, am I? I refer to Alan Kelly. Good evening, Alan.
Good evening, Alan, yourself. Yeah, thank you for those kind words, and I'll send the cheque in the post to you.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got to compliment you on the background there. It's far more professional than mine. Did you arrange all that behind you?
I would love to take the credit, but I can't. My wife has framed it, and I mean, if you'd have seen it when I had photographs everywhere, every bit. You'd have spent half an hour looking at what's behind you, but she's framed it very well and put some nice pieces in there that reflect that history as you spoke previously.
Absolutely. No, look, it's looking good, Alan. It's looking good. Alan Kelly, if anybody doesn't know, former Sheffield United goalkeeper. Previous to that, at Preston, where his father was a great goalkeeper as well. Blackburn Rovers towards the end of his career. Republic of Ireland, 34 caps, was a member of 2 World Cup squads. One of them with Jack Charlton's Ireland. We'll come to that in the light of that wonderful documentary that people are watching at the moment. And since then, has worked as a coach for Everton, goalkeeping coach. And previous to that, Ireland, the 97 international, Alan, as goalkeeping coach for the Republic. Now, you left for the best of reasons because you're an asthma sufferer and amid the pandemic. You could have hung on for 3 more, couldn't you?
I'm not sure my lungs would have said that, but no. Listen, it's in any sport to be blessed enough to to last a couple of years. But I think I did it on and off for like 16 years, and those 97 internationals. Working with 6 years with Giovanni Trapattoni and Marco Tardelli as manager, assistant manager, Ian Brady as well. Getting to the European Championships when it was only 12 teams that qualified, so it was just fabulous experiences for me, and part of my journey as a coach that's followed on from playing.
We're still very much involved and very connected with a Premier League club in Everton, and it's become a vital role, isn't it? I dare say when you started, Alan, not every club had a specialist goalkeeping coach, did they? And now it's become so important.
Absolutely. I mean, when I started back in a different century, back in 1985. I didn't have a goalkeeping coach for the first 7 years of my professional career. So, but in a way, you had to find a way. You had to work it out for yourself. You were a young lad who was thrown into a first team. Mind you, my centre-half was Sam Allardyce, and my centre-forward, Frank Worthington, God bless him, who passed away recently as well. And, to have the education from experienced professionals like that and just having to work it out for yourself was a great grounding, for later on in my career. And it was only when we got to Sheffield United and Mike Kelly, who's the England goalkeeping coach and no relation to mine, but fabulous coach. If you speak to Simon Tracy as well, he'll tell you that, we thrived under him, and he really developed both our games and allowed us to, hopefully put in some good performances for Sheffield United.
And of course, you had that great rivalry with Simon Tracy that I well remember. And the thing that really came across to me was, despite that very keen rivalry, you always supported each other. That's something I've noticed about goalkeepers in clubs. They must be almost wishing an illness or an injury on the other, but they never show it, and they all support. It seems to me.
Because we know what needs to be done. There's only one position. You can't fill in as a defender across any one of the 4 positions or 5 positions. If it's a back 5, you've only got one position. We know especially myself and Simon, we knew that if one got in and got any run of games, then you could not play for sort of 5 or 6 months. But the way it worked out, we sort of, if one got injured, the other one filled in, and it sort of worked seamlessly for 7 years that I was there. And obviously Simon went on to, I think, play over 360 games for Sheffield United, and a fantastic goalkeeper and representative of the goalkeeping union.
Indeed, you both excelled in Dave Bassett's time and later under following managers. And we're going to recall later in this part one a particular highlight against Coventry in the FA Cup, a quarter-final. You know what I'm talking about. Blades fans know what I'm talking about. We'll come to that. We'll relive that as one of a couple of videos we've got in this show. I'm just wondering, having watched with great emotion, and I worked with him. I say worked with him. I dealt with Jack briefly when he was a manager at Sheffield Wednesday, quite early in my career. So he was a daunting character. I've watched the documentary, absolutely fantastic. But I do wonder, with a little chuckle, what Jack would have made of the expectation of goalkeepers these days. And bearing in mind, you coach goalkeepers, you coach Jordan Pickford, the England #1. The expectation that these goalkeepers will play out from the back. What would Jack have made of that? Tell me.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, you were left in no uncertain terms of what your responsibility was. One, keep the ball out the back of the net. And two, when you do get it, to kick it as high and as far as you could, because that, as he said in the documentary last night, getting behind international teams, they've not experienced it, they don't know this type of way of playing, and you were left in no uncertain terms as to what your responsibility was. But equally, he placed that responsibility on you to sort out all the set players, defensive set players. So it was a goalkeeper's responsibility. Well, it wasn't my debut. My debut was against Germany away, and they hadn't been beaten at home for 40 years. And the night before the game, he said to me, in front of all the other players in the centre circle, "You're playing tomorrow, young'un. It's your debut. Now get on with it." And that was it. And I had to get on. I had to go around all my teammates, Paul McGrath, Andy Townsend, the captain, Ray Houghton, Gary Kelly, people like that, and tell them where I wanted them at, say, defensive corners or wide free kicks. So you're invested in your own position, but the positions of others, specifically at set players. So what an education and what a learning experience for me.
It was simple and he kept it brief, but in doing so, was it not a sign of confidence? He was just saying, "Go out and do the job because I know you can," sort of thing.
I think it was trust. And I think when you look at his notes last night, I mean, seeing those notes on, the way they were portrayed as well was fantastic, and the way that the trust and the belief that he gave in his players, that you could go and play against Germany. I mean, that team was Lothar Matthäus, Sammer, Klinsmann, Rudi Voller, all these names, magical names from German football history, and just go out and play to the plan, play to the best of your ability, and I believe you'll get a result. And we won 2-0, beat Germany in Germany the first time in 40 years. So the rest is history.
Yeah, people have this opinion of Jack that he was an off-the-cuff, off the back of a fag packet type manager. And to some extent, I think he did make notes on fag packets, but there was a lot going on, wasn't there? But behind it appeared to be off the cuff. It actually wasn't. There was a lot of thought in it.
Do you know what? And when you look at it last night, I mean, it was poignant, it was heartbreaking, it was all those emotions. But when you go back to those notes, when he had a thought, he had to record it and write it down, and that could be it could be on anything. But when you put all those together and you're reading those little passages last night, for me, it was genius. People talk about Brian Clough, they talk about great managers. Jack Charlton, when you put it together and you see behind, the image of fishing, of shooting, off a fag packet, when you see how meticulous he was, both in how he saw opposition and how he wanted his team to play and how he could get a result, for me, he was a genius. And I say, watching that last night and seeing when we played in Belfast in 1993, going into that cauldron that it was then, and again, that trust and that belief that he had not only in himself, but in us as players to get a result to qualify for the 1994 World Cup, that really, hopefully it's coming through now, it engenders that, I don't know, you're bound by that for life, and that is something special to experience as a player, but to also look at a manager and they can actually guide you through that process as a young player and as a team.
Fantastic time. I mean, you must have had a riot at some of the celebration evenings that you had there. I mean, it was all fun, wasn't it? I mean, it might be a bit boisterous, but nobody came down harder on hooligans, real hooligans, and Jack Charlton, as he showed in some of those scenes in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I played in the game in '95 when England played at Lansdowne Road in the riot, you know, and you saw him. There's a little of the clip from the film last night where he's screaming at people to get off the pitch, you know, to get off the pitch, and you know he was a true football man, and he was a people person. He would stop and talk to anybody. He would shake hands with anybody. He would have a word for anybody. He'd have a stern word for you if you deserved it. And just like you said there, if it was a hooligan, he'd give him a clip. You know, it was. I don't know. I think, especially in Ireland, but also when you look at the film from Newcastle at Middlesbrough at Sheffield Wednesday. The reason we're talking about him because he was magnetic. People wanted to talk to him. People wanted to gather around him. He was a World Cup winner. You know, the story that came out last night of all the phases of his life, when you look at it, he was always going to be successful when you see it for me because he was driven, he knew what he wanted, he knew how to get there. 700 odd games for Leeds. You don't do that if you're not a good player. You don't manage it in World Cups if you're not a good manager. And you don't have that adulation from people if you're not a good man. And he's a good man.
Absolutely, you know, and I was privileged to sort of know him a bit, although he never remembered my name, but that's part of the course.
Not your own.
Or yours or anybody else's. But I never saw him happier than one day in his office after I'd interviewed him. He pointed to the corner of his small office and he'd had a drinks cabinet built and put in. What do you think of that? He said. And there was that big beam on his face. Just simple things and simple pleasures. Talking of which, your Sheffield United career was dramatic. I mean, you had those days in the Premier League, and when you look back on it now, it's got to be the highlight of your playing career, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. 7 truly fantastic years with all the ups and downs that you've just alluded to, and you know, going into the Premier League in the first season of the Premier League. And obviously you'll probably hear this from older players. There was football before the Premier League, but you know we were there in '92, part of that new breed coming into this new sort of platform of football. Razzmatazz, you know, Sky cameras, flames going off and all sorts, and you know to be part of that, to be there, in that first step and be part of that. You know, it's something. You know, I speak to my son about it. He's 15, and what was it like? What was it like? So it's nothing like now because the pitches weren't the same. I can tell you that we played on sand and muck back then, but it was just, I was blessed to be part of 1, Sheffield United, 2, the Premier League, and 3, the journey that I went on with both the fans, the club, and myself as well. And I just, it was truly a fantastic experience in my life. Never mind my playing career.
Well, we'll come to one of the highlights in a moment, and we will relive it. But one of your teammates, of course, who's gone on to do celebrated things as a manager, not only at Sheffield United, but particularly at Sheffield United, is the man you call Tufty. Yeah, we don't get away with calling him that. Know him pretty well, Chris Wilder, but a big character and somebody that you were a teammate with. I'd imagine you were pretty delighted to see. Obviously, recent events have soured things a bit, but you must be delighted to see what he was able to achieve. And I wonder if that surprised you in any way.
Not really. I think it was football through and through. I mean, you look at his life. Ball boy, schoolboy at Sheffield, going through the ranks, having the career he has. People also forget about Tufty is that he did the hard yards as a manager. In the lower leagues. I mean, he was fast approaching 1,000 games before obviously he left Sheffield United. And I think when you put the hard yards in, when you've got to. I think when he was at Halifax, probably had to put the lines on the pitch and do, 20 different types of jobs that needed doing, by other people, but you haven't got the resources to do it. And I think people forget that, so he's grounding in the game, both as a player and as a young manager going through the lower leagues and getting in, ultimately ended at Sheffield United when, they were stuck in Division 1. And then the meteoric rise to the Premier League. I mean, put all that together, it is the stuff of legend for me, when especially for somebody who's born and bred in Sheffield and lives in Sheffield now. And it's, to have that effect as a manager at your hometown, at the club that you loved as a boy. I mean, wow, that is special for me.
Absolutely. Sad, I think, is the only description of recent events and his departure. I mean, from a bit of a distance, what have you made of that?
Yeah, well, that's the overriding feeling, isn't it? Really sad, sadness. You know, and I think with what's happened, you know, you're probably not going to hear Chris's side of the story, because these days the way that, you know, agreements are mutual or not, it's, you know, there's probably some non-disclosure in there, so you're not going to hear that side of the story, and that's something, you know, for me, I just hope and that the club, that, you know, they've acted in the right way, great, but, you know, don't go into things that are going to sour that, you know, the people's view of Chris Wilder, because he doesn't deserve that, you know, for what he's done to Sheffield, for what he's brought to Sheffield in terms of the rise from Division 1 to the Premier League, you know, and the great season they had last year. I was there for the Man United game. I got invited over, the 3-3, the atmosphere. I mean, it was my son's first time back at Bramall Lane, and he nearly jumped out of his skin when the first goal went in. It was just magical, you know, and I think the club and the team have suffered through not having the Blades fans there, and I think everybody agrees on that. But, you know, Chris lives in Sheffield. He deserves the utmost respect, both now and in the future. And, you know, the word, you hear that quote, don't you? I hate saying it, but the word legend is used, you know, too frivolously to somebody, but he truly is a Sheffield United legend and will remain so.
A hard act to follow, for sure.
Oh, massive. Absolutely massive. You know, it's and sometimes that's what happens in football, that the decisions are made, and then you've got to look at what's next. So what step is next? Who steps into that breach? You know, how do they follow? What do they do today? Do they completely, you know, change the identity of what Sheffield United were under Chris Wilder? You know, how does that affect the club? How does that then affect the fans? So, you know, it's a massive, the ripple effect, I would say, the ripple effect from any decision, you know, is can be massive. But, you know, in terms of Sheffield United, and Chris will be the same. He'll want Sheffield United to do well, you know, because he's Sheffield through and through, you know, and I think that's a mark of the man, but it's also a mark of his respect for the club and the fact that, you know, he's a fan first and then an employee later.
Certainly in my 40 plus years of closely following Sheffield United, two managers stand out, and Chris Wilder's one, and the other one is a guy that you played for, Dave Bassett. And, you know, that was a tall order following him. But I thought, while the board was made up of controversial characters in that time, they did actually get it right with Howard Kendall. I mean, it needed somebody of stature to follow Dave Bassett, just as I think it needs somebody of great stature to follow Chris Wilder. And Howard Kendall, I think, impressed the players at the time.
Oh, massively. I mean, when he was appointed and Dave Bassett left, I was away with Ireland in Jack Charlton's final game. It was the playoff against Holland at Anfield in '95. And I got two calls while I was away, one from Dave Bassett to say he was going and one from Howard Kendall to say he was arriving. You know, I knew Howard from my father had worked at Everton as goalkeeping coach and also played in the 1964 FA Cup final with Howard at Preston. So, you know, but like you say, in terms of getting that right, he was one of the best managers I've ever worked with, Howard Kendall, ever worked with. The way that he had the effect he had on every player in the squad, you know, and he changed. I would say he changed the way we played. In terms of the style, he brought in people like Sid Cowans, Gordon Cowans, who was an unbelievable player, you know, and transformed the way that we played as well. So not only having someone who's been there, seen it and done it, won all the trophies with Everton, to then walk through the door after, as you say, you know, a legendary manager in Dave Bassett, and then turn around the way we played completely on his head, to the effect that we got to the playoff final, you know, a year later. You know, that obviously, as you said then, that had a transformative effect and was the right person at the right time for Sheffield United.
Well, let's have a look at that. Well, it's only one of the highlights of your career at Sheffield United, but it's the one that most people remember. An FA Cup quarter-final in March 1998. We're talking now, 23 years ago. Sheffield United won, Coventry won. It finished, went to a penalty shootout, and there was a hat-trick of penalty saves by the man in the Blades goal. And let's relive the third of those and the scenes that followed.
The next commentary taker, Howarth to come up. Simon Howarth up against Alan Kelly. Right footed, great save, his third of the night. It's 2-1 Sheffield United, and if they score the fifth penalty of the first session, which is coming up now, they go through to the semi-finals. Now, who's going to take it? It looks like Wayne Quinn is on his way to the penalty spot. Saved it with his knee. And Alan Kelly is the hero, but Wayne Quinn can clinch it, and he does! 3-1 Sheffield United, and they're into the semi-final of the FA Cup. Well, what scenes here at Bramall Lane. Sheer euphoria from the terraces to the pitch, and Sheffield United have beaten Coventry City.
Shoulder high, Alan. The memory of that lasts your lifetime, surely.
Well, there's a picture over, I think, my left or right shoulder bit, because I'm in reverse. But it's something that obviously it's the anniversary's only gone sort of a week ago or whatever it is, and it's just a magical night. I mean, someone asked me a question: what was it like being shoulder high, being carried off? It was like that scene out of Rocky where he's hoisted in the air in the ring, and it was just, I mean, apart from nearly having my ankles broken because people wanted souvenirs, so they tried to get my boots off, but I tied them in a certain way where they would never come undone, so they were going to take my legs with them. It was just one of those moments, that the third penalty and then winning the game was just I get stuck for words with it, really, because the way the fans and the team, knitted together on the pitch, the adulation, the euphoria, just the sheer delight of winning that game and getting to another semi-final was evident by the scenes that you see after. I didn't get off the pitch to I think it took me an hour to get off the pitch. By the time I finished, I couldn't even have a pint. It was St. Patrick's night. I had a glass of water. The bar was shut. So, I mean, but it was worth it. It was worth it because, just as you said there, Alan, you get special moments in your life where things conspire that you're going to be a hero, or you're going to have a good game, or something's going to happen to the team, whether it's through you or not, that it's going to make it a magical and special night. And with the 3 penalty saves, which gets remembered, but for everybody who's there, where were you then? That's the question, and it goes straight back Bramall Lane, St. Patrick's night, and just, yeah, as you can see, it still fills me with delight now.
Well, I was there, and I remember it because you caused me a lot of pain because I had that many rewrites to do for the paper. I'm not sure if it was the Express or the Mail, but I came across the cutting when I was preparing for this. Yeah, I had that many rewrites to do. It was an exhausting night, but actually the perfect result, and I was absolutely delighted.
One thing I'll say about the quality of penalties apart from Gareth Taylor is a good mate of mine, and he's still to this day. And he missed the first penalty. And he walked past me and he went, "Give us a dig out, will you? Get us out of a hole, will you?" I said, "Well, leave it with me, Tails. I'll be all right." But then the penalties that came after that, Bobby Ford, Wayne Quinn to get the winner. a young lad like that to, was that the catalyst for him to go on and play for West Ham and Newcastle and big Premier League teams? So, the effect it had for individuals, but the club and the fans alike was special for everybody involved.
Yeah, he got in the England squad too, Wayne Quinn, or got there or thereabouts. Steve Thompson with a moment of glory. He was the caretaker manager at the time. No, fantastic times.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we've shown the least impressive of the three saves because I watched them. But to show all three would have taken too much time, and we wouldn't have got to the celebrations at the end. Plenty more to come in part two. We'll turn the boot round the other way to see a goalkeeper beaten by an historic goal in part two. You'll know which one that is, Alan. Yeah, there we go. He might rejoin us, and he might not. Do come back. See you in a couple of minutes.